by love. The one who says he is in the light and yet hates his brother is in darkness until now. He is in total and absolute spiritual darkness. I have said this. I don't know if I've said it here. I probably have. I repeat things quite a bit. But I can remember as a young seminary student crying out to God to be able to preach with the power of God on my life. Crying out to God to be a missionary. Crying out to God to know His Word. I know this friend of mine. He cried out to God to be like Jesus, to serve people like Jesus, and to love people like Jesus. He's not the greatest preacher in the world, but I'd give every gift I have to be like him. He chose the greater thing. Donkeys and rocks can preach. Our great goal is to be like Jesus. It's the end of all things we do. It's the end of preaching. It's the end of praying. It is to be like Jesus in the most difficult place on the face of the earth, to be like Jesus, and that's the people closest to you. Because I want to tell you something. People in China that you don't know are real easy to love. But the closer you get to people, the more difficult it is to love people. And that's where we're coming at here. That's where we should be here, in this church, loving people, caring about people, biblically, in the truth, sincerely, with all our heart. Now he says, the one who says he is in the light, yet hates his brother, is in the darkness until he knows nothing. He knows nothing. Well, I've studied here, I've studied there, I've done this. I don't care. Do you love? Now he goes on and he says, the one who loves his brother abides in the light. The one who loves his brother, he's not saved because of his love. But he is demonstrating that he has been saved by the power of God because of his love. And then it goes on and it says, and there is no cause for stumbling in him. Let me just try to put it in my context. You say, that's the boringest preacher I've ever heard in my life. Someone might say that about a preacher. He's the boringest preacher I've ever heard. And then someone stands up and goes, yeah, but I've never met anybody who loves like him. I mean, that's the goofiest person I think I've ever met in my life. Yeah, I know, but I have never met anybody serve in the name of love like that person. You see, kind of removes all stumbling blocks, doesn't it? It's just not important anymore. They're not big, they're not great, they're not fast, they're not smart, they can't do it as well as anybody else can do it on the face of the earth. But when you say, but they love like no one I've ever seen before, it just clears the air. What else matters? What else matters? I had a friend of mine that was had a terrible relationship. His wife I was in there, I was privy to what was going on. It was a horrid thing. He spent 14 years of his life just living. It was a horrid thing. She left him, she left the kids, she left absolutely everything, left him high and dry. And I said, brother, what are you looking for? He said, I don't care. I don't care what the woman looks like. I don't care how smart she is. I don't care the way she dresses. I just want someone to love me. That's all I want. You see what he's saying? Nothing else matters when you get the one thing. But if you don't have the one thing, nothing matters. Nothing matters. Look at this. Verse 11, but the one who hates his brother is in darkness and walks in the darkness. That means not in just this one area of his life is he in darkness. He's dark everywhere. He knows nothing and has nothing to say to anybody about the Christian life. His mouth is shut up because he doesn't love. And then he goes on and he says, he does not know where he's going because the darkness has blinded his eyes. Church, let me share something with you. It is impossible to have a proper vertical relationship without proper horizontal relationships. You cannot have a great, magnificent, fire-filled, on-powered, divine relationship with God if your relationships with the people around you are not right. You don't hear from God because God doesn't speak to you. You're dark everywhere. You're dark everywhere. How many times, and I have had to do this, how many times if I left the house in a hurry or just troubled or just too quick with my wife and just jump in the car ready to go preach somewhere to save souls, and God just basically say, well, you can get in this car and take off, but I'm not going with you. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you better get back in that house right now and start doing some serious apologizing. Why? Don't think about going up if you haven't gone across. Oh, we are to love, and that is a hard thing to do. You think that if I were to get up here right now and to give you all the commandments of the law, I was to go and say to you, folks, we've got to keep everything in the book of Leviticus, we've got to keep everything in the book of Numbers, Deuteronomy, Genesis, every law that's ever been given, we have to keep it. Do you think that would be hard? That's not half as hard as what I'm telling you to do right here. Because this is the fulfillment of the law. This is the fulfillment of absolutely every bit of it. Just love. Love. Well, who do we love? Who do you got? That was the question they asked Jesus. Who's my neighbor? Looking for a loophole. Who's not your neighbor? Well, you don't understand what they've done to me. They haven't put a crown of thorns on your head. They haven't nailed you to a tree, and they haven't thrust a spear in your side. Any more questions? It goes on. Now I want us to go back up to, I want us to go over to John 13 for a moment. John 13. Verse 33. Little children, I am with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. Now, folks, listen to this. If I knew I had just a few short hours left with my wife and my children, I would not be talking about silly things. I would not be talking about who won a ball game yesterday. I would make sure that in those few short hours I had left, I would be talking to those I loved about the most important things concerning me and concerning them. And that's what Jesus is doing here. He goes down to verse 34. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. Now you say, well, what is this new commandment? We go over into 1 John, we begin to get an explanation. He's talking about a new commandment. A new command. But in 1 John he'll say it's an old command. It's not a new command. Here he says it's a new command and not an old command. What is he saying? He's saying this. God has always been love. God has always been love. His character changeth not. He has always been love. God is love. And He has always commanded His people to love. And therefore it is an old commandment. It is the oldest commandment. And to sin is to violate that commandment. And to keep that one commandment is not to sin. God has always told us to love. Then how is it a new commandment, Brother Paul? A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you. Jesus raised the bar so high that when He says love, it means something totally different than when anyone else says it. I'll give you an example. You sit down with me and say, Brother